local artists, famous for their home-baked breads, freshly made soups, and handcrafted sandwiches like Hilla's Thrilla. At Two Fish, you can even grab some wine or beer to take to your picnic or dinner. Bakery, market, and eatery open 7:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. Fridays, and 7:30 a.m. to 5 on Sundays. That's Two Fish Baking at Stewart's Point, a destination of deliciousness. Find out more at twofishbaking.com or call 707-785-2011. That's 707-785-2011.
Today's programs are brought to you in part by the Independent Coast Observer, the weekly newspaper serving the Mendocino Coast since 1969. Each Thursday, the ICO reports on life on the coast with local news, views, and upcoming events for its readers in coastal communities from Jenner to Elk and beyond. For subscription and advertising information, call the ICO at 707-884-3501 or visit mendonoma.com.
Good morning and welcome to Peggy's Place. I'm Leanne Lindsay, your host and producer today, and we have an excellent show lined up for you today. Very different one. We're going to get into that in just a moment. Our guest is waiting on Zoom with us, and we are live on YouTube today. And the name of the guest is Marjorie Dowell. She is a horse trainer and horse rescuer. She's got a few great stories that we're going to be getting into in just a moment. First, I've got a few things happening here this weekend, especially at Wallala Arts. The new play, Radio Gals, opens up tonight at 7 o'clock and runs through the weekend. Saturday, also 7 o'clock, 2 o'clock on Friday. And that is Radio Gals at the Wallala Arts. They also have a few art presentations going on currently at Wallala Arts. One of them is The Seriousness of Purpose, and that's going on through March the 5th. It's a multi-artist invitational art exhibit. And then they also have a chamber music concert coming up on March the 12th at 4 o'clock. And you can find out more about that at wallalaarts.org. And also we have at another gallery, the Dolphin Gallery, paintings by Liz Gladstone, and that's going to be going on through February the 26th. She's a local artist from Scotland, and you can find that at the Seacliff Center, their new location. It's just gorgeous. And also don't forget that you can get free screenings for blood pressure, cholesterol, and more through Mendonoma Health Alliance right by the Sunstrom Mall. And they are open Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. and by appointment. And Tuesday is drop-in, so you can get those tests done just anytime on Tuesday. So we have a little bit about weather going on here. We've got some partly cloudy skies for the next few days, so a nice weekend lined up. And then rain will be returning in the middle part of next week. And then we are looking at about 45 degrees. Currently, it'll get up to 57 degrees. All right, we are going to now tell you about this show that we have lined up for today. Our guest, again, is Marjorie Dowell. She's a horse trainer and horse rescuer who was living in the South Bay area of Gilroy when I first met her back in the fall of 2020. And at that time, I was looking for a horse. I was going all over the state, it seemed, and she had one I was considering. And since then, I have learned about a few horse rescue stories that she has to tell us that grabbed my heart. And I believe that they will yours as well. So for the next 2 Fridays and today, we're going to do something really different. We're going to do a 3-part series called Rescue Me, and it will play out with 2 stories. Starting with Baron's journey about a white Arabian stallion named Baron who through a cascade of challenges Marjorie could never have fathomed, found himself down a rocky and treacherous path from which he almost didn't return until she discovered that what had transpired since she'd had to face the difficult decision to find him a new home. So we're going to hear about that story today. And the next 2 Fridays will be part 2, and that will be called Cloudy Skies. And it's about twin Andalusian brothers known as Cloud and Sky, who had an idyllic life in their early years, but then through tragic circumstances again, they too ended up down rocky and difficult paths from which they may not have recovered had there not been an intervention with a few people, Marjorie included, because at separate times, both of them ended up in kill pens. So we're going to hear these heartbreaking yet heartwarming stories that I promise they have a fairy tale, Black Beauty-like ending. And I will edit this Rescue Me series as part of a new podcast I'm producing, which is being distributed to all podcast platforms later this summer. Marjorie now, after all her struggles and the rescues she's done, despite it all, lives on a beautiful ranch an hour outside of Memphis, Tennessee. And she is with us here today on Zoom to tell us all about these stories. Good morning, Marjorie.
Good morning. It's an honor to be
I
here.
think I'll need to have your mic on. That's something we all experience with Zoom.
Oh my gosh.
Let's see. I'm not hearing your phone. And I think, let me just check. Okay, I have the correct speakers here, but I'm not hearing you. And I've got your mic on.
Oh my gosh.
Let's keep trying a couple of other things.
Can you hear me now?
Let's see.
Oh my goodness.
Let's see here. No, I can't. Here, I'm going to ask you to unmute. Let's see if that works.
Okay. How about now?
Okay, you are unmuted.
Yeah.
So I know that Peggy ran into this problem the other day on another show. I'm wondering if it has something to do with Zoom. I'm going to try something here, something a
Okay.
little different.
Oh no.
Same as system. Let's see if that keeps working. Can keep talking, Marjorie. See
Okay,
if we
so
can.
I have my volume all the way up.
There we.
And
I got it.
oh, good. Well, I'm glad to be here. Glad you
Oh
can hear.
yes,
Yes.
we are too. I've been really looking forward to this show, Marjorie. And how's the weather there in Tennessee?
Well, yesterday it was 71, and today we woke up to snow. So a little bit of snow. It's not sticking, but it's cold. It's like 38 today. So all the horses are bundled up and in their stalls and doing well. So
I'd really love to hear that part. And so for our audience, why don't we set the stage for this first segment called Baron's Journey? Why don't you give us an overview of where you were and the life you were leading when you first met this white Arabian stallion whose story you're going to tell us about today? And so like a bit about your background and how did he come to be in your life?
well, I grew up with horses and grew up galloping race horses and learning dressage and working for trainers. And I had an Arabian gelding who I had done dressage with. And he was down in Central Oregon in Prineville, and I was newly married, and we moved to the Seattle area, and we needed to buy a horse trailer to go get Turk, my gelding. And so I responded to an ad in the Little Nickel, and we went to look at this trailer, and this place was just about an hour north of where we were. And we pull into kind of a sad, dilapidated place, and a lady comes out and says, well, the horse trailer's over there. And it was kind of a junkyard, kind of adjacent to the barn, this old ramshackle homemade barn. And, I could hear a stallion screaming and running in the background. And my husband and I went and looked at the trailer, and it wasn't roadworthy at all. So we, as we're standing there, a white mare, just beautiful mare, thin but tall, goes trotting by because she had gone into the barn to feed. And at her side, right at her flank, bouncing along with his tail straight in the air, was this colt. And he was a chestnut going gray. And he was stunning. He was just gorgeous. And he looked right into your soul. He looked right at us. And they disappeared around the corner and ran into the barn. So, you know, we walked around to the barn and thanked her for her time, you know, politely said the trailer wasn't going to work. And then I asked, boy, that mare is sure beautiful. What is her story? And so she told me that she was the last living daughter of Sotep, who was a famous Raffles son. Raffles was a Crabbit stallion that Lady Wentworth had bred, I believe, and very influential stallion in the Arabian breed. And I knew about Arabian bloodlines because I, of course, had one, and I grew up taking art class in high school, and my art teacher had Arabians, and she loved them, and she had all these books of Arabian Horse World magazines. And so I knew, you know, because of all the articles I had read, and because she would encourage me to take them home and work on my art projects, and we used those books for source pictures, right? So all the things that this lady was saying to me piqued my interest because I knew that this was not an ordinary colt. And then she told me the mare was 30 years old. And I was shocked because
Highly unusual. Right.
well, most people wouldn't breed a 29-year-old mare. And she said, you know, she didn't even know that the mare was pregnant. She bred her, she came back into heat, she thought, and so she didn't think anything of it. And when he was born, she had just these half doors in her stalls, like around the kind of these stall doors that just went across the middle like a stall chain. And he rolled out, got up, and wandered into the driveway. And that's how she even knew. Yeah.
An unusual start in life right there.
Right. And so he was a month old, and I said, well, you know, she said, well, I want to sell him. And of course, what do you want for him? $300, and you have to pay to register him. And so there was no decision to be made. We just handed her the money. And from there began the trips up to, you know, try to bring extra feed for the mare and handle the colt, because he had been completely untouched. But, you know, he was just a sponge that loved everything, that all the attention he could get. He just was a sweetheart. He loved all the attention, and he was so smart, and he just got it. And he really wanted to please and just be with you and do, which is typical of the Arabian breed. You know, they were bred by the Bedouin to live in the tent, you know, with their masters. And they are, a good Arabian has an amazing disposition, you know. So that's how it started. And then
let me just ask you one
sure.
thing. Now, as far as your background and training and with horses, when did that begin?
Oh, I started when I was 2. So
Same as me. It's amazing.
I was, you know, born loving horses, and there's 2 kinds of people who love horses and have that passion, and people who just don't. And you know, my mom loved horses. Her father was a horseman, and of course, on and on back through the ages. And, you know, I always wanted a horse. I mean, I was just born that way. And so when I was 5, I got my first pony for Christmas, which is a whole nother story. And it went on from there.
People often think that the Shetland ponies might be the best thing for a young kid, but little do they know that it can be a real handful.
Oh, certainly developed my character, I'll tell you that. And and I began lessons not long after that. And you know, by the time I was in high school, I was riding upper level dressage. And by the time Turkey was about 10 years old when we got Baron, and Turkey was already an intermediate 1 level. So, and he was, you know, a great lesson horse. He was a great trail horse. He was just a good all around horse. And dressage, of course, does that for horses. I think it helps them become good dressage is, good for every horse and rider.
Foundation. Well, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to Marjorie Dowell, horse trainer, horse rescuer, and we are doing a special 3-part series starting today and for the next couple of Fridays called Rescue Me. And today's story is called Baron's Journey. And we are now talking about Baron, a gray-white Arabian stallion that has a most unique story that is tragic in parts, but heartwarming, and has that fairy tale-like ending. And I'm Leanne Lindsay, your host and producer today, and this is going to be turned into a podcast later this summer. This is KGUA in Wallala, 88.3 FM, streaming around the world at kgua.org and on apps, TuneIn and Radio Garden, and also our own web app. So when you go to the website, kgua.org, and click Listen Live, a web app will pop up and you'll be able to listen in wherever you get internet. And Marjorie, you were just telling us how you had found Baron as a colt and you were taking up some hay. And where does the story go from there?
Well, the lady that had his dam, Calrica, had leased her to a little girl who was using her for 4-H. And the mare was doing poorly. She was thin and, nursing is a lot of energy. And so she, without discussing it with me at all, just when he was 8 weeks old, I show up at the barn and the mare's gone and he's circling the stall crying. And she said, I had to wean him today. And I took the mare to be with the child. She's going to show him, it's April now, and she's going to show him at 4-H fair in June at county fair. And I said, okay. So I called the vet because getting, now in this day and age, it's easier to get full lac pellets and, mare's milk replacer and things like that. But then at that time, we're talking, 32 years ago, it wasn't easy to scare that up, especially in a metropolis area like Seattle. So, which was odd, but the local feed stores just didn't have it, and they could order it in, but it would take a while. And, and the vet said the best thing is just go get a goat, get a milk goat. Well, like that's easy to do. So I bought all the goat's milk I could from the grocery store, and we took him home and put him in a stall adjacent to the turf because now turkey had come up, and we were at this beautiful barn on the Red Brick Road in Redmond, Washington, and so I had to teach him to drink from a nipple, from a Colt bottle, and I found a goat, and I bought this goat Midnight, and she was a handful, let me tell you. And Midnight came with a sick kid who had a cleft palate and was very, sick with pneumonia because they'd been aspirating him with forcing his head up to feed him. And they didn't know he had a cleft palate. And I was leaving with the goat. I loaded her in the back of my 1970 Chevy Nova. and they were going to knock the little buckling in the head. And I said, well, I'll save you the trouble. If you'll give him to me, I'll take him, because I was aghast, So now I come home with 2 goats and a colt. And
the part that you've got. And tell people too, just to back up a little bit, you don't wean horses that young.
No, typically, there are some people who do it at 3 months. We typically don't wean them until at least 6 months of age. And if the mare is doing well, and then the weaning process, I usually do it over a fence line where they're next to their mother and it's not so stressful. And it's a gradual separation, and, there's no reason to cut it off harshly and so young, and it's hard on them, and socializing more than even the milk. After 4 months, they need their mother to grow up properly and be a proper horse and learn how to be a horse and be socialized. So
they do,
weaning a 8-month-old or 8-week-old foal is detrimental in a lot of ways to them socially. Well, he would live with the goat, when I wasn't there. And then when I was there, Turkey was gentle enough with him that Turkey kind of took over being his mother. And I was his mother because I was feeding him, I was milking this goat who wasn't, real cheerful about that whole process. And that went on for months. And then when she was, when it was time to wean him off of milk, and he was already eating, to be clear, horses start to eat hay and grain a little bit by a month old or even a few days old. They'll start mimicking their mothers. But they don't digest it that well initially, So a foal that young can't just be straight onto grain and hay. You can just, they don't have even the teeth for that at that point. So anyway, he thrived with all the attention and the milk, and he grew up to be a nice little stallion, and we showed him starting when he was 2. We took him to the Arabian shows and showed him at Liberty and in Halter, and he did well, and he started breeding mares then too, which I don't normally advise, but because he was doing well at the shows, people wanted to breed to him, and he was so easy. He was never a jerk. He was always a gentleman, and almost you feel like you're watching something you shouldn't be watching, because he was such a lover to his mares, and his foals he's very prepotent. He really stamps his foals that you can always tell that's a Baron foal. You can just always tell. So
how long did you have him in the show circuit?
The last show I think that I took him to was in 2006. Yeah.
2006.
Yeah. So from 1994 to 2006. And just local regional shows and dressage shows. And we did horse expos as well, and he was a crowd pleaser because he also, through his career, I used him as a lesson horse and a trail horse, and he was a ranch horse, my colt starting partner in Wyoming. So we moved to Wyoming in 1996, and I had a big barn there, an 80-acre ranch, and a business. And so my colt starting partner there also used him to go gather and rope and drag calves to the fire with him, in the fall and for branding. And my ex-husband used to take him elk hunting. So he's just a well-rounded, all-around guy. And then I was taking lessons with Jean-Francois Favier from the Cadre Noir in Saumur. And because at this point I was really, at Grand Prix and trying to just be the best rider and trainer I could be. And so I had gone from more of the German school of dressage to more of the Franco-Iberian classical dressage approach. Because
can you describe what the differences are?
Yeah. So the German or the German style, they're more competitive based, and they ride a different horse. They typically ride a warm blood horse, and warm blood horses have a different disposition than a hot blood horse, which is what I had with Arabians, thoroughbreds, saddlebreds, Andalusians, are all hot blooded, and they're sensitive and they're smart and they're really willing to please and work hard, and they, and so they don't do well with kind of that more forceful, firm approach that a lot of the German riders and trainers had at the time. And
we're learning so much today.
A lot of repetitive drilling, and where these horses, they get it, they're smart, you show them 1 or 2 times, they got it, you move on, you touch on this, you move on. And, an old cowboy told me the worst thing you can ever do is knock the curiosity out of a horse. And it's true.
That's a good one. And it sounds like you really took the time to learn and take good care of your horses. He had an idyllic life then, and I'm going to show a few pictures and videos in a moment that you've shared with me that I'm going to share to our audience. And we are online on Zoom, and well, we're on YouTube right now. You can go to KGUA's YouTube channel, and we are also online to be heard around the world if you've got internet at kgua.org, and we're at 88.3 FM along the Mendocino and Sonoma coasts on the Northern California area counties. And we're talking with Marjorie Dowell from Tennessee today, who used to live in the South Bay area of Gilroy, among all these other places she's telling us about in Redmond, Washington and Wyoming, and now living on a beautiful ranch in Tennessee. Marjorie, you've been through some of your own challenges in life, and you are going to get into that in just a moment. We're going to still pick up on this story, Barron's journey of where he was at this time, this amazing stallion. You've taken him to all these shows, and he's so versatile and can be used even with children and be taken out on hunting trips and things like that. So he's had this amazing, incredible life. So what happens at what point in his life that things start to change?
So, in 2006, I got divorced after 18, 19 years with this man. And it just wasn't a healthy situation. And so, also at that time, we had the housing crisis brewing in this country. And my clients were beginning to feel the sting of losing their homes and losing their jobs and having to relocate. And I lived at that point in Lapine, Oregon, which is a small town in Central Oregon in the Oregon outback. I could see the wreck coming, and I also got horribly sick. When the stress, I think, of the divorce and everything, my health took a nosedive. And so
does that.
Yes. And so, divorce is a horrible thing I would not wish on anyone. So I ended up realizing that I'm going to have to move, and I can't sell the farm. Nobody wants it. The bank doesn't want it.
It's a cascade of a variety of things that have happened here.
Yes. And then also, I'm working but I would get pneumonia, for example. And with my health, when you get pneumonia, you'd be sick for a month or two. Like, it's not like a normal person. So, so I realized I was going to have to move, and boarding a stallion is nearly impossible in a public facility. People just, for liability reasons. As a professional, I understand it. It's very difficult, even just having riding school, commercial liability insurance. They don't want you to have any stallions on the property, because stallions have this reputation, right, of being dangerous, right. Even though he is the furthest thing from a dangerous stallion you could ever ask for. But so I went and set about finding him a place to go that was good. And I did find that in a wonderful man named Larry Baxter and his wife, Kathy. They had a beautiful 40-acre farm in the Portland area called the Red Hawk. And he had a herd of Arabian mares, and he knew exactly what Barron was. And he had some Appaloosa mares. And so Barron had a wonderful life with Larry. Larry took excellent care of him. He was well fed. Larry took him hunting. Larry took him trail riding. His granddaughter rode the horse, and he only bred him once. And he has, I think she's 8 or 9 now. He has a daughter named Flicker, who's actually available. She is available for adoption in Oregon. She's owned by a rescue now. She's part of this whole story. So anyway, fast forward, Larry and Kathy retired to Idaho. They were school teachers, and their son bought the farm, and he's not into horses. So Larry sold his whole herd to a gal who had helped him paint and landscape, and she seemed really together. And he thought this is a good thing. They're all going together as one herd. It'll be great. And it seemed like it was okay. And then now I start to get messages from this person because I said, of course, by all means, pass on my contact information. I sell all my horses with a right of first refusal, meaning at any point in that horse's life, I don't care how old they are, if you can't keep that horse for any reason, no judgment, because things happen in people's lives, and it's not always a good time to own a horse. You know, people have health problems, financial problems, whatever, relationship issues, you know, sometimes horses need to be moved on. And that's just the reality of it all.
Life happens, and this animals get caught up in it, whether it's horses, cats, dogs, whatever. So,
and I'm not guaranteeing that I can take the horse back, but I will do everything within my power to make sure that horse finds an appropriate place to go if I can't take him back. Well, he hadn't really discussed it with me, I think, because it was just this opportunity. He thought it was a good situation. And he had offered the horse back to me in the past, but I couldn't take him. And then I didn't even realize he was serious about placing these horses. So we hadn't talked in a while. And so when I found out, and then he connected me with this new owner, I had some friends go check on him that lived in the area. And they said, everything's good. He looks good. Everything's cool. I said, great. And I made it very clear to this woman, hey, if anything happens, please come to me first, and I will do everything within my power to help you place the horses and or take him back. And she said she would. And so keeping that line of communication open, I think, was critical to the situation, because there was a little red flag, just something about her just worried me.
perhaps in the way she spoke to you or communicated with you.
Well, she would drop off. She would come in kind of hot and heavy and seem very interested in talking, and then I wouldn't hear from her for several months. So that was concerning, you know, like, I mean, not necessarily the not hearing from her for several months, but like I would try to fire off a text and her phone was not working, that kind of thing, right? Where it's like, oh, this person doesn't have this phone anymore. So that was unusual. You know, most people have their number forever. And she, I think in 1 year had 3 different phone numbers, and, you know, so it was just unusual, right? So I didn't know her story. I didn't know her at all. I didn't know what was going on, but I just wanted to kind of keep tabs on Baron. Well, in the meantime, we were selling our place, and
now, which one was this again?
So now we're in Gilroy.
You're in Gilroy. That's where I came across.
Remarried a wonderful man in 2012. I met him in 2010, and in 2012 we got married. I moved to the Bay Area, and so I, you know, we had a farm that we'd been at for a long time in Gilroy, and just with the fire danger and on, mainly the fire danger, but there were other complications. We chose
mudslides and floods, things like that.
Yeah, it was stressful. And, you know, the cost of living in California, especially with horses, and when hay prices are starting to creep up to $40 a bale, as you know, it just becoming not sustainable. So we decided to sell our place. And so we had just listed it, and here she comes again with, will you take him? I said, yes, I will take him. And then it was, well, he has to go with his colt, because he had incredibly sired a colt at the age of, I think, 29. He fathered a colt out of an Appaloosa mare.
Baron is now 29.
Yes. and he has a baby on the ground, a little cute bay with 4 white socks and a blaze. And he lives with this colt, and she wants them to go together. And so a student of mine said, I'll buy that colt. And, we were going to move to this person's place anyway. And she said, let's just bring them here to my place. I have stalls, and let's just bring them here since you're going to be moving here anyway in a few months. And we'll just do that. And I was like, that's amazing.
And that was in Livermore?
Yes.
Livermore. So now we're over in the East Bay.
Yes. So I know my life is here, there, and everywhere.
That's why this story is so interesting, is because of your journey yourself, and now Barron's journey and what he's gone through. So now you are living over in Livermore, but this is really kind of a temporary area for you till you found your place, your ranch there in Tennessee, which sounds and looks so lovely. I can't wait to visit it one day.
You're welcome. Time.
Yeah, and it's just an hour north of, or did you say north or east of Memphis?
I'm an hour northeast of Nashville, actually.
I mean, Nashville, music capital. What I could not forget that. Nashville. All right. So now that we've got that straight, back to when you're now over in Livermore, you've hooked up with someone else who's going to help with the colt. Take it from there.
So then she kind of pulled back on, letting them go. She couldn't find a vet to do a Coggins and a health certificate, which we needed to move them south, over state lines, because they're in Portland. We're in in California. And then she started saying how she just hated his filly, and that mare is just no good, not trainable, and this and that, spoiled, whatever. And that started to alarm me, because the horses are not the problem, we are. So
well put.
And if a horse is a problem, it's because you made it that way, honestly. So I suggested that she contact a local rescue, in the Oregon Arabian Horse Rescue and Education. Dusty, she went out there and managed to take that filly, and the filly was really bad off, very thin, wounded, infected wounds on her legs and face. She said that the horse had no sense and went over a fence, this, that, and the other. So she tied her up in the stall for 3 days with no food or water, and it was appalling. And Dusty said the filly was just screaming, help me, was frantic to get out of that barn. And so now Flicker is beautiful. She's in amazing shape. We're a little over a year post-rescue for Flicker. And she is going well under saddle, walk, trot, canter. She's available for adoption. She's amazing. And she looks a lot like her father.
It's amazing the transformation that animals and humans can go through when given the chance, the positive.
Everything, I think, responds to love and kindness, compassion, empathy, patience, it takes time. And so it was finally, we're almost to my birthday. And now after she said, you have to buy the colt, we agreed to do it. Then it was, I need $1,800 for the horse, for Barron.
At 29.
At the time, we're not wealthy people, and we're struggling along like everybody else. And my husband just said, because I said, you realize now if we do this, it's going to be another $1,500 just to Oakhurst to pick him up and refeed him and transport him from her place to Oakhurst. And then we are going to meet them in Grants Pass and pick these horses up and bring them home. And he said, just do it. Give her the money. And he said, well, give it to the vet. So we paid her. She had a past due vet bill. So we paid the vet, and then for the colt and for the vet bill. And then the vet gave her money, because we didn't want, because at this point it's clear she's homeless. She's a hoarder. She's living in her truck with her son who has Down syndrome. And it's clear that she's in a terrible situation. And, and now I'm getting pictures of him, and it's gutting me, because he is emaciated. He is filthy. His eyes are swollen and weeping and infected. His feet are a mess. And he's clearly, he looks like he's about to die. Like he was down to about 600 pounds.
And we have some photos to show you that are heart-wrenching. And
Yeah.
we also have images of before and after. So we've got the good part after coming. But
yes.
But when you saw him, it was just gut-wrenching, like you said.
And I'm just thinking of him being cold and hungry and bereft of, like, you know, why am I not being fed regularly? And the thing is, his molars, since he was 25 or 26, he has to be on senior feed, and she knew that. But senior feed costs money, and so it's cheaper to feed hay. And she tried to feed him pellets, but you know, he gets 2 scoops twice a day of senior and I make mash out of it. And then, you know, he can't eat apples, so I give him applesauce and, you know, things like that. He has to have everything mushed up. Well, she wasn't doing that for him. So he's got all this. So imagine the cruelty of this. There's all this food. I guess it's almost like being in the ocean, stranded. You're surrounded by water and there's not a dang thing you can drink, you know, and it's the same thing for him. There's all this food and he can't eat it. So
that's a good comparison. And I actually am going to just pause for a moment and let our YouTube watchers see what he looks like at this point. And to do that, I'm going to share the screen.
Okay.
And then we'll just describe it again, what he's been going through. And I'm going to now pull up this photograph of him. Where was this taken and when?
This was the intake photo the day that Ben Root from Oakhurst Equine went and picked him up and got him away from that lady.
He is emaciated.
Yes, and filthy.
Filthy.
Yeah.
And he just, it looks like the spirit's out of him. And then, was this taken before or after?
That was the day that Larry took him home from me when he was 18 years old.
Oh, so this is looking back on the way he used to be.
Yes. Yes. That was in Lapine.
He's beautiful. Okay, for our radio listeners, he is, rearing up, beautiful gray white Arabian stallion, and just gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. Just the lines are amazing. And yet on the left-hand side, we've got years later, through tragic circumstances, a horse that is now emaciated and dirty and filthy because he has been neglected and fallen into a tragic circumstance, which, you know, life happens and it hits people differently in different circumstances. But here is some, I believe this may be some of the after pictures. Let me pull this one up. This is a video of him. Is this after when he comes to Livermore?
Yes, that was not long after we brought him to Livermore. And you can see he's just full of himself. And that's his colt with him, I believe.
Oh, and look at him pawing the ground there and just looking so beautiful. Up he goes again. And he is looking already just a few days later in such better shape, just from the grooming that you did and the care that you started giving him. So I'm going to stop share now so that we can go back and talk about this. We've got so many more to share as far as videos go, but I don't know how much time we're going to have today because we want to hear the story of how you got up there. So I'm going to stop sharing now and go back to our main screens here. Okay, so describe what it was like when you ended up going up there to pick him up.
So we drove through the night because, you know, my student is a nurse and she had worked all day. So then I met her and we used her truck and my horse trailer, which was his old trailer. Barron knew that trailer, still have that trailer, bought it in 1999. And we drove all night and we got up to Grants Pass and we collapsed into bed at a hotel. And then we went to the barn first thing about 8 o'clock in the morning. And there I had not seen Barron in person in 8 years. And I walked around the corner and him and his colt were in a stall. This is at the racetrack, and it was raining and muddy, and he's standing there with a blanket on, just draped over him like he's a coat hanger. He was so thin. And the colt looked okay and was friendly. But Baron, his head was kind of hanging, and he was standing there, and I called his name, and he perked up. And I sent the video of that, and you can see that he knows who I am. So, and then you can see we took video and pictures of him in his trailer on the way home, and he loved to go places, because when he was growing up, we used to go to the Tolt pipeline, and the different parks, and we used to go places. And he just was. Now this is him coming into the barn just a few nights ago from being out to pasture.
Oh, this is just a few nights ago.
Yeah, but there's a video
full of energy with you there.
Yeah, there's a video I sent of him when I actually first laid eyes on him after this whole ordeal of dealing with this person. And she was very, she would scream at us. She would become very erratic, and clearly there was like some mental health issues, it seemed like. And so
now,
we had to.
Let me just stop right there and back up just a moment. Who had gone with you, and what kind of trailer were you pulling? What did it take to get there, and what did you find, with her in that circumstance once you got there?
So Ben Root, actually the vet, took the horse from the former owner when we finally were able to get her to calm down. Because what we essentially did, it was, everyone says, oh, you just want to really give that person the business of treating an animal like that. And I understand that anger, and it is very upsetting to me to see animals in pain and neglected and suffering. But the reality is that if I went at her angrily, and that would shut down the lines of communication. And the reality is she didn't have to sell him to us. She could have just let him die, because of the way animal cruelty laws are. If an animal has food, water, shelter, well, they really, unless the animal is on death's door, animal control will not intervene most of the time. So it's pretty tough when you're
there are a lot of
with
things I didn't even know.
Hoarder type personalities. So we just try to be very kind and compassionate and encourage her to get help for herself and her son. And we basically said, we're agreeing to give you what you want. If we'll give you a day to think about it. If you choose to not take it, that's okay. We'll just accept your decision that you're going to keep these horses, and that'll be that. And that was really a scary day, because, she could have. People do. But she came back the next day and said, yes, I accept. And so then we typed up a bill of sale that we emailed to the vet. He made her sign it. He gave her the money, and we settled her vet bill, and he took the horses. And so then after a week, because he had to evaluate Baron, because at this point I didn't know if the horse would have to be put down.
Right.
I was willing, no matter what faced us, I was willing to accept it. So whatever was best for him.
Yes, and I just want to let our audience know, if you've just tuned in or you're just watching on YouTube, that this is Marjorie Dowell, who is a horse trainer, teacher, and horse rescuer. And we're talking about this story today about Baron's journey and what can happen and how things can end up going awry, and then how it can all be made better again. And it does have a good fairy tale like ending here. And we're going to tell another story next week about two other horses that are twin brothers, and their names now are called Cloud and Sky. And the name of that segment is going to be Cloudy Skies. So we'll get into that and how they ended up into kill pens. But I'm Leanne Lindsay, your host and producer today on KGUA. And I'm turning these into a podcast for distribution later this summer. And I'm talking with, again, Marjorie Dowell, because I ran across her when I was looking for a horse back in 2020, the fall of 2020. And she had a horse I was considering. And then I started following her on social media, watching what she was going through with her sale of her Gilroy Ranch, moving over to Livermore, and what that took. And then I heard about this story. I started hearing about her journey up to Grants Pass in this truck, in this gooseneck trailer that they were hauling. And that grabbed my attention. And all this time later, I've just finally wanted to bring these stories on air to share it with you. And now we're going to find out what happens when she gets to the vet. Okay, so now, Marjorie, we're back at the vet. What happens?
So the vet evaluated him, and they started refeeding him Purina Impact Senior. And I sent you a video of him eating on intake, and he said there's nothing right. He's not sick. We treated his eyes. We've wormed him. We've trimmed his feet. We've drawn a Coggins. We're doing a health certificate. He isn't sick. He isn't lame. He's starving. He has no molars. He needs to be on senior. And I think you're okay. I said, wow. Wow. And he said, and there's no lack of appetite. And, we've done some blood work, his kidney function, his liver, everything is fine. His CBC is good. And it was just such a miracle, So Tiffany and I went up to Grants Pass, where they met us a week later, and we picked the boys up and we hauled them home in one swoop, from Grants Pass to Livermore. It was dark when we got there.
I have done that journey in one swoop. It is a long one.
It is, yeah. And we unloaded them, and a good student and friend of mine, Rick Fugino, met us there. And he, held the light. She didn't have any barn lights at that point. And we let the colt out, and he was staggering around because he'd never really been hauled too far before. And he had hardly been halter broke, but he was so good. And then Baron unloaded like a champ. He screamed, "The king is here." And we put him in the stall and fed him. And, he just thrived. And within 8 weeks, that horse had regained about 250, 275 pounds.
That's a lot in that amount of time.
He just packed it on.
Yes.
And we turned him out in the arena with his colts, and they'd play, and he just did great. And one vet said, well, he does have cataracts, and we think he's 90% blind, but he got out of his stall a few times and managed to avoid breaking his leg in a hole. And, he could clearly see the fence and everything. So I had another vet evaluate him. He's not blind at all. He can see just fine. And so Tiffany actually even rode him. He's still rideable. He enjoys being ridden. So he loves to do things, he loves to be groomed. He really loves to be groomed. So he just has rebounded and persevered. And so then the final thing that was really, I had no idea at this point that we would be moving to Pleasant Shade, Tennessee. But we found this place and we loved it and we bought it. And then my vet, I said to her, can he do it? It's 2,500 miles. It's a lot to ask of any horse, let alone now a 31-year-old horse. And she said, he can do it. So he had a touch of heaves. He got heaves at Larry's. There's hazelnut trees orchards around him. And I guess there's something in the hazelnut orchards that can affect a horse and give him a little bit of COPD. So we put him on dexamethasone, and I had an albuterol inhaler for him.
For calming. Right.
We bought Easy Boot clouds that he wore for the whole trip, that really, because I-40 East is pretty brutal through Arizona and New Mexico, but once you cross into Texas, it's smooth as can be. But those roads were pretty rough, and I was glad that he had those boots that saved him. And we got to Texas, and he was, every day when we'd unload him, well, up until Texas, we unloaded and overnight them, and we had 1,000 miles left to go. And he's dragging me to the trailer because he was the first one on and the last one off because he was in the first slot of the trailer. And he just couldn't wait to get on the trailer and go, and the other horses are tired at this point, and they've gone 1,500 miles, I think, at this point, and they're all starting to look a little tight in the belly and a little tired, And so I never had to give him Banamine. I had to give Banamine to the mare, but not, not him. And so
so our audience understands Banamine and albuterol. Albuterol is for helping his lungs, correct? And then Banamine is
like a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, and we give it for joint and muscle aches, but we also give it for colic. And because she was looking a little drawn up and tight in her back and her belly, we thought, she's not colicking, but just give her half a dose as a preventative. And he was also on a steroid, dexamethasone, just to prevent an outbreak of the heaves on the trailer. And of course, they had water and feed in front of them the whole time. But then the last 40 hours of the trip, we couldn't unload them. We got to Henrietta, Oklahoma, and there was no safe place to unload those horses. They were better off on the trailer. And I had hired a warm blood size trailer, extra tall, extra wide, and it was bedded deep. And so we just had to let them stand while we rested, and then we pushed on. And when they finally got here, I beat the hauler here, because we shadowed the hauler across the country. And so I was able to, which might seem a little excessive to some people, but with I have a yearling, and then I've got this 31-year-old, and then everything in between, 5 horses to take care of. And we had 3 adult dogs and 5 puppies at the time that were 10 weeks old. So I really wanted to keep my finger on, how their legs were wrapped and the meds and their feeding and their drinking, and we keep electrolyting them. And, so everything went well. But
that was a real journey unto itself right there.
Oh, goodness. And it was an undertaking. And we got here about 9 p.m. And the hauler didn't show up, even though she had been right behind me. She somehow didn't show up here until 2 a.m. So she was afraid to come up the driveway in the dark and cross the bridge. So she parked on the street, and I had to unload all the horses on the street, which is a very quiet street, but lead them over a bridge into this strange barn in the dark. And I had no barn lights at that time. So I had...
and we have about 1 minute here now. We are at the end of our show. I can't believe it.
Oh, went by fast.
I know. We can talk again next Friday, summarize this again, but go ahead.
He's doing great. He has just taken to it like a duck to water here. He loves running in the field and talking to the mares, and he's just happy. He's a happy horse.
I'm going to do everything I can to get a lot of the pictures and videos up on posts that I'm going to share on Instagram and Facebook. And I'll be turning this into a multi-series podcast too. And the next couple of Fridays, we're going to talk about another story that you've been involved in, and they're twin Andalusian brothers. And are they both white as well?
They are.
Gray, white. And that story involves a kill pen and a rescue, and it is really incredible too. So we're going to be doing that for the next 2 Fridays, and that'll be called Cloudy Skies. And the total series here is called Rescue Me. I'm Leanne Lindsay, your host today and producer. I'm working on a documentary about horses and about the transformation and positive transformation that can happen when horses and people are given a chance, just like here that we're hearing from Marjorie Dowell from Tennessee, who used to live in California and Oregon and Washington and a few other places. Thank you for joining us today, Marjorie. I'm looking forward to talking to you again next Friday.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Take care.
You too.
And now we're going to go to Native America Calling here at KGUA in Wallala, 88.3 FM. We are streaming online at kgua.org and on apps, Radio Garden, TuneIn, and many others. And coming up again from Albuquerque, New Mexico is KUNM, Native America Calling. They always have some great shows that they have every weekday at 10 o'clock. After that, it's going to be our Big Picture Science. And this show, Peggy's Place, repeats again at 1 o'clock. And that'll be coming up this afternoon, February the 17th. Thanks for listening today. And we are going to say goodbye to all of our YouTube friends right now as we head into Native America Calling.
Bye-bye.